Hello, I'm Justin Gaffrey, and welcome to the Justin Paint series. This is our second painting here in the series. We're going to be painting some common poppies with some super thick texture paint. Okay, everyone, let's get your kit together and let's paint a painting. So here we go. We are going to paint some poppies today. I'm really excited about it because this red paint that I made here, or we made here in the studio, is nuts amazing. It's got this perfect silky deep red. I love it. Perfect thickness. So I'm going to kind of go through what we've got here on the table that comes in the kit. So this is the most common palette knife I use. It's a 3 7/8 kind of spade blade here, but just to go over for anybody who wants to understand how I work with these knives. Basically, when I first got these knives in the mail almost 20 years ago, had no idea how to use them. I just kind of used them what made sense to me, and this is what makes sense to me. So anyway, this is the bottom of the knife. This is the top of the knife. Pretty much the only time you're using the top of the knife if you're scooping paint, but I really don't even use that. I'm always using the bottom of the knife. And one of the key things is when you're working, especially when you transition colors, is to get this as clean as possible. So we've got the palette knife here, and we've got this 1-inch paintbrush here that we're going to use to do the priming with. As I said, we have the red super thick paint here, and we have the titanium white super thick. We made a primer, which is an acrylic paint here with some phthalo blue in it, and we're going to use that to prime this base of the canvas here. And we have these jars of paint we made the other day. We have a phthalo blue and an Indian yellow that we made. So I'm going to go ahead and open these up. You know, I like to, on these kits, you know, when I was learning how to paint, color was one of the hardest things. You kind of struggle with composition and technique. And then when you throw balance and colors in there, it's a lot of information all at one time. So it's really kind of good to work with a limited palette color so you can achieve a better painting and less learning curves all at one time. Okay, so what's a little different about this kit is we made these canvas panels here, and they're made with Baltic birch, and they sit about 1.25 inches off in this 3/4 inch panel. And what I'm really excited about these is the way that we're going to paint this painting with the intention to have the paint hanging over the edge. And so it's going to have like a floating feel around it, like the whole thing is going to be floating and going off the edge. And we'll walk through that when we get going. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to prime this panel here. And we're going to use this. This is just titanium white with just a tiny bit of the phthalo blue already mixed in there. We're basically going to spread this all over and get a good coverage on the canvas here. I call them canvases, it's just by habit, but it's a wood panel. I'm going to kind of paint over the edge of it too. You know, you can, mix this color on the palette, but a lot of times when I'm working on a painting, I use my my panel that I'm painting on. The beginning part, I'll use it as a palette, and if I'm working my way down, you know, eventually I'll just cover that area where I use as a palette. So you can mix this in a cup beforehand, but I usually just go right on the canvas. It's just a lot more efficient that way. So getting that nice coverage there. And so this is, you know, years ago when I started to teach myself how to paint, I started painting sunflowers being inspired by Van Gogh. But also I started experimenting with other flowers, and flowers were just a way for me to find a way to use color and composition and texture. And poppies were pretty popular painting style. So I kind of adopted a traditional poppy style with this texture here. And basically what we're going to have here is we have, this is going to be the sky and this is going to be the greenery. And basically so this is going to be the furthest point away. This is like the horizon line here. So what we'll do first, so if you have some scissors or a razor blade, go ahead and, you know, you can cut your pastry bags open there. So I'm just going to pipe a little bit of this white paint on the top here. And so this line doesn't have to be as tight as the seascape did, because we're going to kind of paint into the horizon. So basically everything from this line up is going to be the sky. And at this point, you can make your sky as deep blue as you want. And it could kind of mix with the primer, it's not a big deal. So that was just a little tiny dollop of that phthalo blue paint. So the first part, I'm just going to get basic coverage on the edge. Get the edges all covered up to the horizon there with the blue. And I kind of like it how things work out sometimes, because, you know, that's just a good pattern for a sky in of itself. So now, like where this horizon line is going to be, I'm going to put another strip of white in there. And it could pull up as clouds or however you want to do this here. So basically I'm going to smooth that out and I'm going to swoop this pattern up. And I'm just like gliding across the top of the paint. You can see how it's just barely, and these are kind of practice strokes right now. So I'm just like hovering over the top. You don't want to push all the way down like that, because it just goes all the way down on the canvas. So just practice kind of hovering over and let the paint underneath grab off the paint that's on the palette knife. So I'm just dragging it over the top. So you can go, you know, if you want a nice big old cloud in there, just put yourself a nice big old dollop. I'm gonna just get a little bit of yellow. You gotta be careful. So right now I just made some green and I didn't want to do that, and you don't want green in your sky. So I'm gonna clean my palette knife off. This part's important if you want to add some yellow into the sky, to try not to mix it with the blue. So I've got just a tiny bit of that Indian yellow on there. And I just want to just like etch this little cloud with a little bit of yellow here. So I'm going to swoop it down and swoop it back up. And try not to let it mix too much. Like right there, I just let it drag across the top, so it didn't mix too much with the blue. If I go back over that again, it's going to turn green, so try not to go back to it. So the sky is good for now. And basically what we're going to work on is the vegetation that's going to be on the bottom. And it's a choice. So it's going to be a lot of green. And so you can either go light green, and then all your flower leaves have dark green, or you go dark green on your background and light green on the top, just so it has a nice contrast. So we're going to go for a little bit of lighter green in the background, so that when we do our flower stems and leaves and grasses, it'll be a darker green. So now we're going to just take a little bit of that Indian yellow, just a tiny bit, kind of practice there and see how that comes out. And we just, you know, made some green. I don't, you know, most of my greens I make myself, and I usually use, you know, some type of yellow, but Indian yellow really warms it up. An Indian yellow mixed with either a phthalo blue or an ultramarine blue. So I'm just going to get some coverage here of green on the bottom. Most of this that we're painting on the bottom is actually going to be covered up. So this is kind of just like an impressionistic background right here at this point. Okay, so I'm gonna work on this horizon, and now I'm gonna try and integrate this horizon. And so, you know, it doesn't have to be so literal, but this is where I'm gonna get a little yellow, this Indian yellow, and I'm just gonna swoosh this across there. And it's okay if it turns a little green, and this is how I transition. I'm gonna pull, now instead of pulling up, I'm gonna pull down. And it's okay because it's all just light green down here. And so we basically have our green foundation in here right now. We probably won't need this paint again. You could save this and use it for all your next paint-ins. So now I am going to go to, so now that I've worked my way all the way down the canvas, I am going to start mixing my paint on the palette here. So I'm going to make up some green. And you know, when you're mixing these greens, you can go pretty heavy on the yellows, and the blue is really powerful and it'll take over. So just a tiny bit of green, almost like when you're putting salt in food, just a little salt at a time, and mix it before you put it all in there to gauge what kind of green you want. So obviously we're going to need this green a little bit darker than what's here right now. So I'm going to go a little bit more yellow and just a little bit more green. So this is like a mid green. So this is light, this is mid, and so this is just going to be a little texture on the bottom. And then when we actually make the flowers, it's going to be the darkest green. And so basically, I'm just making some textured foliage, and these kind of represent grass and leaves, kind of ambiguously. Kind of brush it over the side there, and those are like what I was talking about before. Like if you want to have this stuff hanging off the side. And again, most of this is going to be covered down here, so this is just background still right here. And I had just realized, you know, that, you know, taking advantage of having the paint flow off the side of this. So I'm gonna pull this over here and get a cloud that kind of swoops up off the edge here so we get more of that hanging over. Okay. I'll make sure try and remember when we start working on the flowers and the green to really kind of plan them out, how they're going to lay out, you know, because as you've seen in the earlier video with like a complete painting, you know, you'll see like there's enough space for like 4 to 6 large flowers in here. And so kind of you got to kind of understand where you're going to map them out. And you know, if you want one really hanging over really good, you could just start with that one hanging over right there, or start out here and know you're going to leave that space right there. So we're going to just jump right into the red here. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna save that space because doing them off the edge is a little harder, a little riskier because they fall off. So I'm gonna do the one that's planning on being next to it, which is gonna be right around here. And there's a whole lot of ways you can make these poppy flowers, but this is kind of a pretty simple way to make them like right out of the bag. That's the convenience of working right out of this. So we have a nice shape there ready to go. If you add a little bit of water, you can wash this off or you can wipe it off. You're gonna get some of this phthalo blue and just mix it with just a little bit of the red. And this is the dark color we're gonna use to make the centers of the poppies. And so, you know, this is not a traditional way to paint. This is just kind of like taking your materials and using them what makes sense to you, you know? So I'm using this brush and I've got it kind of tight, the dark alizarin, almost dark deep red color in here. And my goal here is on a poppy, they always have those dark centers, and poppies only have a few petals. There's not a flower with a lot of petals. So we're gonna open up the center with this, and this part's kind of tricky, but basically all I'm trying to do at this point is hollow out the flower. Okay, so now I have a nice hollow center there, and you know, honestly, you can leave the flower like that. It's a pretty safe way to go. But I'm gonna wipe off this, or I can mix a little bit more of that blue in there, so I get that deep, dark, like a violet brown color almost there. I'm gonna pop some more of that color in there, get that hollowness showing in there. So at this point, you know, sometimes you just know your limits, and if you want a really successful painting, you know, you can just make it easy on yourself. And honestly, you can leave your flowers just like this and add stems to them. But we're gonna add a little bit of, just a little bit extra stroke there and a little bit of color. So we're gonna take a little bit of that yellow and mix it with this darker color we have here. And we just kind of get this deep orangey color just to give it a little contrasting color. So this pyrrole red here, it's beautiful on its own, but it's either nice to have a darker or a lighter contrast on it. So I'm gonna, like I'm pulling a petal up here and pulling a petal up there, but I don't wanna go all the way down where I catch the green. And so I just have just a little bit of paint on there, just to cast a little bit of contrasting color on there. And I'm gonna be kind of tilting and pulling up like this. And so I have a nice little stroke there. So now it's just the flower's a little bit more abstract. It's got a little bit of movement, a little bit of hand feel to it. And so I'm kind of a messy palette worker here. I got a lot going on. Sometimes I don't think about compartmentalizing my space here. But now is where we want to go ahead and introduce some really dark green. So now we have a higher ratio of green, blue to the yellow there. And I shouldn't have done that, but I did. I kind of messed up my yellow there. It's not a big deal because I'm only making greens with this yellow for the most part. So if you want this to get a little bit earthier, we could just pull some of that darker violet-y color in there to give it a little bit of earthiness to it. Some of that orangey color in there. And so this is a different technique, and so what I'm going to do, you have this extra bag that was put inside your kit, and this is what we're going to use to pipe the stems out with. So go ahead and get this bag kind of folded all the way down, because there's not going to be a lot of paint in here where it's almost folded halfway down, and we're gonna stuff some paint in here. But the key is right now is we need to get this really dark green we made right here all the way down, kind of covering the walls of the bag right here. Because what this is going to do, we're going to put the lighter green paint in there, but this is going to kind of like stain it on the way out. So now you can see it's got this nice green coverage in here, and that little bit of color in there to give it good contrast. And so I'm going to take some of this mixed green in here, and then kind of just slam it down so it all gets down into here. You don't want any big air bubbles. I'll pop a little bit of white in there. And then, so that paint is all here down, okay? Go ahead and slam it down a few more times to make sure it's in there. And so basically all the paint's here, and what I do is I cut my fingers, my thumb and this pointing finger in there, and I got this nice tight grip on the pastry bag here. This is just a traditional pastry bag you use for cooking. We're gonna cut the tip with your scissors or a razor, not too wide, probably like, 3/8 of an inch, a little more than 1/4 inch right here. And you can see it's dark coming out here. And so now we're gonna see the dark part contrast with the light part. And so you can see the paint's building up under there, and I'm just gonna drag it slowly, and we have a nice stem there, okay? So good for now. We're gonna keep filling this up. And we're going to go ahead and do another, we'll do this one that was going to fall off the side here now. Putting it up higher. And if you want right now, you can go ahead and put all your spots down, or you could do them one at a time. I'm going to go ahead and just lay out my second one here too. So hopefully you'll have some protection on your table, which reminds me, you know, we pack these kits, but next time after this kit, we'll provide some paper to go down on your table so you don't ruin your table. Because the reality is, you know, it's a little bit of risky business trying to push this flower off the edge, because it could fall off, and not a big deal if it does. But if it falls off on your table, then you just have paint on your table. I'm kind of going to leave that one like that shape, just that one little pole there. And before I go back and do the stems, I'm going to go ahead and get all my other flower tops done. Go ahead and hollow this one out, and pretty much just pushing it all the way back down to the wood there. And you know, you can alternate in heights, you know, so I got to decide if I want this one low or high. What do we want to do? So let's do this one high, kind of crossing over the horizon there. And then we know this one is going to go off the edge too. So I'm going to go ahead and hollow those out. This brush is getting a little fat on the end there. So I'm going to kind of rolling it to make it a little tighter there. So just push it all the way down to the canvas so you get that nice hollow space. This one's going to be tricky because it's going to definitely want to fall off. So I'm going to push it back in just a little bit when I'm going down. Ooh, that little twist helped. Okay, so now we go in and do a little contrast. You can go dark with the same stuff we did there that was on the inside, and you can do a dark contrasting petal. And then we can get a little bit of yellow. See, I told you I messed up getting that blue in there, but that's okay. And so these are really loose interpretations of flowers. When I was teaching myself how to paint, if I tried to paint a flower exactly what it looked like, I wasn't enjoying myself doing it. So these are truly just impressions of flowers here. And I don't pay attention to them being organically correct or anything. So it really doesn't, you know, they don't have to be perfect. Just do what looks good to yourself. And so actually, before I put the stems in, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of more foliage in here. So make a little bit more dark green. So take a little of that green, take a little. And so now we're going to, remember the impressionistic grass we were putting back there? We're going to kind of do one a little bit darker now. And so I have the paint on the knife, and there's actually dark under there. It's really important how you get this on your knife to keep that nice pointy shape. And I'm going to drag that down. And I'm just going to put a few of these in here randomly just to give it some texture. Make a little bit more green here. I'm going to make this next green more yellow, so it'll have a nice little bit of contrast as well. And so basically what I did is, you can see I just went all the way across. I have a few gaps, and I'm going to pay attention to those gaps. So like right here, since we like to, if we're going to like let the paint go off the canvas, I'm going to do this one kind of really exaggerated over the side right there. You can see that. It's filling up another empty gap there. And you can see I picked up a little bit of that red. Try not to do it too much, but it's okay to just have those nice varying contrasts. Okay, so that's all kind of the background foliage. And I'm going to come in here with this bag. And it's important when you work with this bag to keep it twisted, keep it tight, okay? And when you're about to put the stem on there, you have to have constant pressure. So you might want to just practice a little bit, making a line that does not break as you're going, just like that. So it's just like constant pressure. I'm just pushing these two, my thumb and this together right now, my pointer finger there. And so kind of pay attention where you want your lines to start and end. And so on this one, I'm going to pop it up there. This one I'm going to do in this spot here. And this bag, you can see right there, it came out a little lighter. So when you turn this bag, there's dark. These are all the different, and so you can see where there's some red in there. It's all based on what was stuck on the bag. So you can have different colored lines. But mainly I'm going for the darker contrast. Okay, so now we're gonna kind of put some loose grass blowing around there. We're gonna use the rest of this green we have in here. And it's important to this part to get it really tight. Just go ahead and twist it there and really tight. And you're holding this twist here with this hand right here. And we're gonna like have some expressive grass kind of blowing here. And kind of, you know, figure out where it's going to end. You don't want to just do it randomly because I don't want the grass to go right over the center of the flower. So my starting point is here and I'm going to end there. So I've got a piece of grass there and it's there. So here's a nice open spot. So I'm going to go here. And so this just gives a little bit more movement, color, and texture. And it gets a little risky when you come way out here because if you mess it up, it's hard to go back and fix it. If you mess something up here, you know, let's just say you mess something up, you can come right back in here, you know, and smooth it out to look like another leaf or a piece of grass, you know. And, you know, I put a little blue in there and that's okay. So you just heard that there, and that's the air bubble. And so once it starts getting air bubbles, you got to be really careful because it can mess things up. So this flower here, I just realized it needs a little bit darker on it. So I'll take a little bit more of this blue, mix it in there. That a little bit darker for that nice contrast. Wow, and you know what? I just realized we're done. I didn't realize that. Okay, I don't know how long that was, but we'll see. So if I have enough paint in my bag here, I'm going to just sign my name with the paint. Yeah, and that's it. So you can kind of see how it's all hanging off there. This is going to be really nice how this is hanging off here and here. I'm really excited about that in these new type of canvases that we're making. Go ahead and check your edges right here. I've already messed up the, I didn't realize I had a camera over there to see that I had not gotten that, but I've already got really dark paint on there, so I'm just going to use my finger here to do that, but you can use your palette knife, or if you had another paintbrush in there to make sure that those are covered, which is pretty good. And you know, when we were doing over the edge, you can totally come off on the top if you want. If you want a big cloud falling off there, not a problem. Just go ahead and just do that. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, maybe a little. It's always scary coming back into it because if you mess it up, like right now we got a painting that's working just right, and I have potential to mess it up. But no risk, no reward. So now, there we go. So that one's hanging off a little bit. So yeah. So we have some paint left over, and you can use this for whatever you want, or you can use all the paint. So there's just a little bit of white left, and we've got all this red left. So you could have put it all on there. If we wanted to, we can add another poppy right here, give it a little more contrast. So yeah, on this one, because this was so small and this brush is so big. If you had a small brush, you could top it in there, but I mainly just put this in there as an impression to have one a little bit closer to you. Didn't have to do that. I was just trying to use up the paint, but I did use the knife to carve out the middle instead of the brush. If you had a round knife, which, you know, we'll eventually have all those for you to get, then a round knife would actually be perfect for that. The problem is this is so skinny on the tip to get in there, and that's why I used the brush. But yeah, that's it. And so I have leftover paint here. Red is one of the worst ones to mix in with everything because it just turns into, you know, this dark brown purpley mess. However, you could be much more efficient than I am and not waste all this. But what I would do working with this paint is I'll scrape all my paint into a pile. And so I have this color here. It's not a very attractive color, but what I'll use this for is I'll use this for building bases and foundations, or I'll turn it into brown and I'll use it when I'm making a tree so I don't have to waste it, or just get really efficient on the palette. So if I know I'm going to be working the next day, I just cover it with a little piece of plastic, little plastic wrap or something, tuck it all around the edges, kind of like guacamole there, and you're good to go. So yeah, here we have it, a poppy painting. So now that the painting is done, you know, in the studio here, we put fans on them overnight, and so the paint is kind of fragile right now. So if you have to move it, you need to be really gentle and set it down gently. Don't do it. If you have an opportunity to leave it in place and put a fan on the table or near it, it'll be pretty dry the next day and it'll be easy to move, but it will take under a fan and just average humidity, this will be dry enough in like 2 or 3 days to hang on a wall. However, if you do not have a fan, this could take over a week to dry, and it might be hard to leave this on your kitchen table. But at least by the next day, it will firm up a little bit. But be careful, you know, to lift it gently and send it down gently, because hard movements will knock down this texture, and you know, you'll lose these peaks that are sticking up. So relative to this painting, if you guys had any questions, you know, feel free on our YouTube channel to leave any comments, and please subscribe and so you can stay up to date on all of our kits and all the information and tutorials that will be coming out. And yeah, so we'll see you the next kit.